Hello viewers, welcome to the second lesson, Models and Approaches of Social Policy. Objectives of this lesson are 1. Explain the various models of social policy. 2. Explain the various approaches of social policy. 3. Explain the evolution of social policy in India. Let us understand what is model. Model is a medium through which a person looks at the complex realities. Generally, we can say that model is a simplistic version of a complex situation. Models serves as a reference for the work and gives us a clear understanding of what would happen. They describe strategies for accomplishing a vision, the appropriate steps to be taken to get there. Some models grow out of the specific ideologies of change and some in response to concrete situation. Richard Titmuss has advanced 3 models of social policy which summarize the predominant items of contents and approach of social policy. These models are 1. Residual welfare model of social policy. 2. The industrial achievement performance. 3. The institutional redistributive model of social policy. Residual welfare model of social policy is the model, and this model sees state assistance as temporary, minimal, requiring evidence of need and available only after all other avenues of help have been exhausted. This formulation is based on the premise that there are 2 natural channels through which an individual's needs are properly met: the private market and the family. Only when these break down should social welfare institutions come into play, and then only temporarily. As Professor Peacock puts it, the true object of the welfare state is to teach people how to do without it. The theoretical basis of this model can be traced back to the early days of the English Poor Law and finds support in organic, mechanistic, biological constructs of society advanced by sociologists like Spencer and Radcliffe Brown and economics like Friedman, Hayek, and the founders and followers of the Institute of Economic Affairs in London. Second, the industrial achievement performance model. This model of social policy sees that social needs should be met on the basis of merit, achieved status differentials, work performance and productivity. Consequently, the community with its larger financial and technical resources should undertake the responsibility to develop and promote social and welfare services. This model incorporates a significant role for social welfare institutions as adjuncts of the economy. It holds that social needs should be met on the basis of merit, work performance and productivity. It is derived from various economic and psychological theories concerned with incentives, effort and reward, and the formation of class and group loyalties. It has been described as the handmaiden model. Third, the institutional redistributive model of social policy. This policy is based on the moral concept of social justice and thus recognizes the right of the individual to obtain the basic social and welfare services, irrespective of whether he is able to pay for them or not. This model sees social welfare as a major integrated institution in society, providing universalist services outside the market on the principle of need. It is in part based on theories about the multiple effects of social change and the economic system, and in part on the principle of social equality. It is basically a model incorporating systems of redistribution in command over resources through time. These 3 models are, of course, only very broad approximations to the theories and ideas of economists, philosophers, political scientists and sociologists. Many variants could be developed of a more sophisticated kind. However, these approximations do serve to indicate the major differences. All three models which we have discussed involve consideration of the work ethic and the institution of the family in modern society. The three contrasting models of social policy represent different criteria for making choices. Now, let us look to the approaches to social policy. The main approaches to social policy making is outlined briefly by Wall, Stephen and Moore. They are: 1. New right approach, 2. Social democratic approach, 3. The radical socialist approach, 4. Feminist approach, 5. Anti-racist approach. Now, let us look at the first approach, the new right approach. This approach to social policy, referred to as market or economic liberalism, a neo-conservative or anti-collective approach. The term new right came about in America in the 1970s. This approach believes that the government should avoid becoming involved in regulating individuals' lives. New right approach puts a lot of stress on individual freedom and liberty. New right thinkers and policy makers tend to make a distribution between, on the one hand, individuals who deserve welfare services and help, and on other, understanding individuals who should not receive government welfare and support. This approach puts a lot of emphasis on individuals' responsibility and choice, and the motivating effect of a free market on both the purchase and providers of social welfare services. They believe that free state-funded welfare services result in inefficient and expensive state organizations and welfare dependency on the part of their users. This approach opposes the idea of a state-funded service and welfare system, argues that the current public system should be drastically reduced. Social policy makers who were adopting a new right approach in the 1980s developed policies that encouraged individuals to buy services from private providers or use voluntary funded charitable services. 2. The social democratic approach. In this approach, it is also referred to as social liberalism and a collective approach. This type of approach results in the state providing for greater levels of social welfare services and in regulating people's life to an extent that is unacceptable to new right thinkers. They believe that the state should protect its citizens from the extremes of poverty and should act to prevent the development in society. One choice that these people have is to contribute some money to charities that help the deserving poor. In contrast, social democratic thinkers believe that it is the duty of the better off to support people who are in need. The policy makers are more likely to impose taxes on high earning individuals and use this to fund on social welfare services. The third kind of an approach, the radical socialist approach. This approach, referred to as the Marxist, neo-Marxist or conflict approach. People who hold radical socialist views oppose the capitalist economic system and blame it and the small minority of very wealthy people who benefit from it for inequality and social problems. Socialist approach tend to see people as cooperative and in essence compassionate with regard to each other. Socialist also sees behavior as being shaped by social influence. As a consequence, it is important in the socialist scheme to create the kind of environment in which all people can develop and thrive. The poor standard of housing, high levels of unemployment, and also as factors that create certain types of social problems. This approach would use extensive state intervention to challenge the capitalist system and capitalist class in its mission to create new, more cooperative, supportive and egalitarian in society. 4. The feminist approach. Lewis argues that it is a mistake to think that it is possible to identify a single feminist approach to social policy. This approach shares the characteristics of viewing of social issues from the perspectives of women. A theme of many feminist analysis that social policy have articulated inbuilt male assumptions about gender roles and have implemented patriarchal welfare state situations had their security benefits withdrawn. 5. The anti-racist approach. Anti-racism is a centered social policy goal. It is argued that effective social policy measures can be used in positive ways to counter individual, organizational and societal racism. People who seek anti-racist social policy want government to recognize racism as a major social problem. Anti-racism is an approach to combating inequalities. Along with these approaches, Hall and Midgley suggested the following approaches for social policy. They are the statist approach, in which statism is inspired by a collectivism ideology, suggesting that the best society is one in which people cooperate to meet their common needs. Under the influence of collectives, they form a variety of associations or collectives and share their resources for the good of all its members. 7. The enterprise approach. The enterprise approach is based on individualist ideology that stresses the fundamental importance and certainty of the individual life. The enterprises approach stresses primarily of market in social welfare. Social policy should be compatible with market economy and reinforce market relations. The populist approach. This is an approach based on populist ideology that emphasizes the involvement of the people and their common values, beliefs and culture in social welfare. The concept of the people is poorly defined. Advocates of the populist approach believe that the people rather than individuals or collectives form the core of society, and the best society is one that recognizes and gives expression to their lifestyles and beliefs. The holistic approach. This approach incorporates elements of the statist, enterprise and populist paradigm. From statism comes recognition of the continued importance of proactive government to make economic and social investments and regulate the private sector, meeting people's basic needs and guaranteeing fundamental freedoms. The right-based approach. The right-based approach was engendered from the definition of certain human needs and conditioned as constituting entitlements and rights which all citizens possess and reasonable society must meet. This approach locates social policy as the expression in policy terms of citizens' rights, and these rights could be those deriving from basic needs or as part of the citizens' entitlement. Evolution of social policy in India. Indian Constitution, especially Part 4 of the Directive Principles of State Policy, indicates the origin of social policy in India. The second source is the official documents released about various 5-year plans. Planning Commission has developed plans with respective annual plans, etc. In the first 5-year plan, that is 1951 to 55, it is mentioned in detail. Objective of social welfare is the attainment of social health, which implies the realization of such objective as adequate living standards, the assurance of social justice, opportunities for cultural development through individual and group expression, and readjustment of human relations leading to social harmony. It was not possible to run these programs due to the lack of resources and administrative structure. But in 1953, Indian government developed Central Social Welfare Board, a landmark in the field of voluntary action. It later developed many policy of its own. The second 5-year plan, that is from 1956 to 61, showed signs of progress. It proceeded from narrow social welfare to broader developmental welfare. They said social welfare is concerned with the well-being of the entire community and not only of a particular section which may be handicapped in one way or the other. The third plan, that is from 1961 to 66, started programs for women and child welfare. Fourth plan, 1969 to 1974, followed third plan but worked for family planning with greater emphasis. The fifth plan developed the policy against poverty. During this plan, one more program of integrated child development services was started, which was an all-embracing program for children. The sixth plan from 1980 to 85 emphasized on the removal of poverty and improving the quality of life. The seventh plan, 1985 to 1990, worked with the earlier program with emphasis on employment generation to the poor. They started various programs such as Integrated Rural Development Program, National Rural Employment Program, Self-Employment Program of Urban Poor. The eighth 5-year plan, 1991 to 1996, had more of preventive approach. It aimed at working with earlier programs, but it also aimed at checking population explosion and unsafe drinking water. It worked for quality of life and for health for all by 2080. Ninth plan, which is from 1997 to 2002, recognized the integral link between rapid economic growth and the quality of life of the mass of the people. It also recognized the need to combine high growth policies with the pursuit of our ultimate objective of improving policies which are pro-poor and are aimed at the correction of historical inequalities. Thus, the focus of the ninth plan can be described as growth with social justice and equality. The 10th plan from 2002 to 2007, this plan focused on the following aspects: reduction of poverty ratio by 5 percentage points by 2007, providing gainful and high quality employment at least to the addition to the labor force, all children in India in school by 2003, all children to complete 5 years of schooling by 2007, reduction in gender gaps in literacy and wage rates by at least 50% by 2007, increase in literacy rates to 75% within the 10th plan period, all villages to have sustainable access to potable drinking water within the plan period. The 11th plan from 2007 to 2012, this plan focused on the following aspect. It aimed at creating 70 million new work opportunities, reduce educated unemployment to below 5%, reduce the headcount ratio of consumption poverty by 10% point, raise the wage rate of unskilled workers by 20%, reduce dropout rate of children from elementary school, lower gender gap in literacy to 10%, reduce infant mortality rate to 28 and maternal mortality ratio to 1% per 1000 live births. When we see the sources of national policy, we find that directive principles of state policy and 5-year plans provide background for social policy, but there are some other documents responsible for the development of social policy such as National Education Policy, National Health Policy, National Population Policy, National Children's Policy, National Nutrition Policy, Industrial Policy including Social Security and Social Insurance, Program of Old Age and Unemployed Allowance, national policy of forestation and wasteland development, national policies of employment generation, national policy for rural welfare and development, various social legislation, international policies such as the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, etc. New economic policy. Model is a medium through which a person looks at the complex reality. Generally, we can say that model is a simplistic version of a complex situation. Richard Titmuss has advanced three models of social policy, that is, the residual welfare model, the industrial achievement performance model, and the institutional redistributive model of social policy. These models summarize predominant items of contents and approaches of social policy. Question 1. List out the models of social policy. Question 2. List out the approaches of social policy. Question 3. Explain the feminist approach to social policy. Adams R. 2002. Social Policy for Social Work, New York, Palgrave. Brooks S. 1998. Public Policy in Canada, An Introduction, Toronto, McClelland and Stewart Publication. Blackmore K. 1998. Social Policy, An Introduction, Buckingham, Open University Press. Gautam PR and Singh RS, 2011. Social Work and Social Policy, Concepts and Methods, New Delhi, Centrum Press. Deccan, Olila Koviasulu and Stubbs, 2003. Global Social Policy, Themes and Prospects, Helsinki. Birch H.A., 1999. Social Welfare Policy, Analysis and Choices, New York, the Hathaway Press.